You're welcome. Those who are just joining us. Oh, okay. I was asking question. I said we should just we quickly just did a review of all we've done in the past 3 classes. And we ended with the favorable environment. And I said, can we list the 6 basic components that should be present in a favorable environment? And everybody just went quiet on me. Hey, wow. Have I been talking to myself? There's one I keep making noise about. You should be able to give it to me now. Huh? Wow. Okay. Freedom, structure and order, beauty and atmosphere, the Montessori material, safety and security. Okay, freedom. Olubumi, I don't understand your NOMA. What do you mean by NOMA? Safety and security. I think that safety and security falls under freedom. Okay, let's go quickly. We've spent 10 minutes already. Please go over your notes, go over our recording. We have quite a lot of resources that have been providing to make this very easy for us. Please, I beg you. It will be very discouraging if we do not make use of all this. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm not alone. All right. I will know now when you answer me quickly. All right, I'm sharing my. Right, so today we are going quick into, you see, I say it's getting interesting now. So today we're looking at the Montessori teacher. We have 2 slides, and those are the 2 slides we'll treat for today, for tonight, for this class. And we're starting straight on with the Montessori teacher. In other words, the role of the Montessori teacher in a Montessori environment. What's our role as teachers? What are we expected to do? How are we expected to do them? How should we prepare to be part of these 3 basic components in a Montessori environment? Don't forget, in the last class, we discussed that the child, the environment, and then the adult in the environment. The adult here is the Montessori teacher. And in the center of these 3 components is the philosophy, the Montessori philosophy, which is why I kept emphasizing that it is important that we understand the Montessori philosophy. If we do not understand the Montessori philosophy, it would be very difficult for us to, do what we need to do excellently as a major component. Sorry, I'm trying to fix mine. Okay. It will be very difficult for us to carry out our activity in that environment. All right, so the first slide here. The first slide here says, the aim of the Montessori teacher must not be to fill the child with knowledge about the quality of things such as dimension, shape, and color, by means of object. Neither should her object be to train the children to be able to use without mistake the material which is presented to him, so that he does the exercise well. So neither should our object be to train the child to be able to use without mistake the material which is presented to him, so that he does the exercise effectively. So Maria Montessori here is emphasizing that the teacher's role is not to directly impart knowledge. I will explain later because it may sound a bit confusing. It's not to directly impart knowledge or ensure the, sorry, I'm having a problem with. Okay, so it's not to directly impart knowledge or ensure perfection of execution of the exercise. So for instance, we're talking about dimension, shape, and color. Of course, we're going to present the activity to the child. We're going to present the lesson to the children. But the ultimate goal is not just about what you are going to present to the child. Rather, the role of the teacher should be to guide and to support the child's natural process for learning or natural learning process. So that way, it's not that you are not imparting the knowledge, but the goal is not to just go and impart and give that knowledge or present the lesson. Please understand what I'm saying. Our role as the teacher is to guide and to support the child's learning process. So in other words, the activity, the lesson we're presenting is about the process, not the end result. Eventually, the child will get to that end result, but our role is to ensure that we're guiding and we're supporting. And that's why you find that in a Montessori environment, children will learn at their own pace. Child A will not learn at the same pace with child B because their learning process differs. So it is our role to ensure that we're guiding and we're supporting their learning. That's why you find that oftentimes in a Montessori environment, we don't do group teaching. When is a project teaching, when is cultural teaching, when we are doing a group activity like teaching in the cultural area where we teach biology, geography, there's some activity we will do as a group project. But even inside of that group project, we will still carry out some individual activities with the children. So our role is to support and to guide them through their natural learning process, through their natural learning pace. So what are the key responsibilities when we look at this quote? What are our key responsibilities as the Montessori teacher? Number one, we're supposed to facilitate and not instruct. So we're facilitators. We're facilitating their learning. When we instruct can come in form of just passing information. But when you facilitate, you are stirring up the child to take charge of his or her own learning. So the teacher does not simply fill the child with facts about dimensions, for instance, like we see in this quote, about shape or about color. You're not just filling the child with those knowledge. Rather, what you're doing is, what we're expected to do is to create an environment where the child can explore and discover these qualities independently. And of course, that's why we now talk about the materials in the environment and the opportunity for the child to have that freedom to be able to use these materials. Because it's one thing for you to have them. A lot of us in the traditional method, we have some of these materials, but it's more like the teachers own the material. When it's time to present the activity, you just bring it and present it to the child and talk about it to the child, then you take it away. But that's not what we're supposed to do. We create an environment where the child can explore, where the child can discover these qualities independently. What's our responsibility again, looking at this quote? We are supposed to encourage the process of perfection. So we encourage it. We are encouraging them through that process. The goal is not, the goal is not for the child to perform tasks flawlessly, because failure is part of success, really, like we always say. When people are afraid of failing, then indeed it will be very difficult to succeed. So we are meant, the goal is not for the child to perform tasks flawlessly, but rather they should be able to engage in meaningful work, make mistakes in the process of this engagement, and also refine their skills through repetition and self-correction. I'm sure you have had this severally, where children in the Montessori environment will have the opportunity to repeat an activity, to repeat a lesson. When we present materials to them, you will see it when we get into the practical classes. We present to them, when you are done with the activity, you will tell the child, now I've presented this activity to you. You know how to use it. Whenever you want to use it, you know where to get it from. And do not forget to return it the way you met it so another child can use it. So our role is to ensure that they engage in meaningful work, and yes, they can make mistakes. And I said to you that most of the materials in the Montessori environment have what we call the control of error. So they're able to self-correct themselves. For instance, there's this activity, the knobbed cylinders, in teaching the children different dimensions. It's a cylinder with knobs. The cylinders have a socket to put in the different dimensions. And when the child is working with it, the child will put, if the child is putting a cylinder with a wider dimension into the wrong socket, definitely it won't go in. So the child will have to look for the correct dimension to fit in the cylinder. So it's self-correcting without you going to fix it for the child. And there are loads and loads of activities like that for the child. Again, what's our role? Looking at this quote in this as a Montessori teacher, we're supposed to observe and to guide them. So rather than constantly directing the child, the Montessori teacher will observe their interest, observe their needs, and then will step in only when it is necessary to provide guidance or introduce new materials. So the first thing we'll do, of course, is introduce the child to the activity. Once you introduce the child to the activity, there are some instances, it happens a whole lot in the class, where you will observe and see that it looks like the child is playing with that material. What you do as a teacher is to observe, and if you notice that the child is just playing and it looks like the child is not carrying out the goal for the activity, you quietly go to the child and inquire what is happening. Can you tell me what you're trying to do? He says something else you're doing with the material. Oftentimes, if they are not using it correctly, they correct themselves. And sometimes with experience, I found that they're actually trying to create something else with the activity different from what you presented to them. And that's why we need to be patient to watch them. Sometimes also, they go to pick materials that you have not presented to them. It could be their sensitive period that is working there. So you need to watch. And that's why I mentioned earlier on, our role to guide is to see that maybe this child is now ready to be presented with this. It's ready for this new material. And then you present the material to the child. Also, Our role, our key responsibility is to respect individual development. I said that earlier on. Children learn at different pace. So we need, every child will learn at their own pace. Our role is not to impose knowledge, but rather what we're supposed to do is to provide the tools and the environment for the child to develop understanding. Absolutely very important. You provide the tool. You, inside providing the tool is your guidance. Inside providing the tool is your support, and ensure that all that the child will need for that learning pace is available in the environment so that the child can develop understanding of that concept naturally. When you are able to do this, then the process of learning is very easy, even for you as a teacher. Next slide. So with us as a Montessori teacher is a matter, it is a matter of transference of activity, with which the teacher is at first invested, but which by our method is left mainly to the child. So we invest in the activity. So for instance, you want to present a lesson to the child. You start off the process of the activity, but the goal as a Montessori teacher, our goal and our aim is to ensure that we hand over the learning to the child. That's why Maria Montessori said, but which by our method, in other words, by our Montessori method, the activity, the transference of activity is left mainly to the child. So Maria Montessori's method emphasizing shifting the responsibility of learning from the teacher to the child. We shift the responsibility of learning from the teacher to the child. The teacher will start it off. The teacher will present, but at the end, you want to ensure that the child is carrying on with the learning. So for instance, in one of the videos that I posted in the general group, the math activity, if you watched it very well, you will notice presenting virtually all the presentation. When I start to present it, I will show it to the child and say what it is. Ask the child to say after me. The ones that I have to use the 3-period lesson, I will use it. But after a while, I'll now tell the child, would you like to carry on with the activity? And you sit there and watch the child. So for instance, sequencing of numbers 1 to 10. If we're using the cards and counters, you start by presenting, you put the 1 there, you put the counter 1. You put the 2, you put the 2 counters. You put the 3, you put the 3 counters. And the child is working with you. By the time you get to 4, you can invite the child. Would you like to carry on with the activity? Now you are transferring the process of the learning to the child. That is the goal for us as Montessori teacher. So, for instance, if you want to compare that method with the traditional method, in conventional classroom, in traditional classrooms, the teacher is like the central figure. The teacher is actively instructing and oftentimes, honestly, controlling the learning. And that's the style you get with the way we arrange our chairs and tables in a traditional classroom. You won't find that in a Montessori classroom, where the children just sit straight on their, and they're all facing the teacher, and the teacher is standing in front of them, either by the blackboard. You won't find that in a Montessori environment. The class is like an open plan class, where there are movements in between. You saw that video I posted on the general platform. And so the teacher can move freely in between the children. It doesn't seem like the teacher is in control. In a Montessori classroom, the teacher will gradually transfer activities to the child, allowing them to take charge of their own learning. So in other words, we are not what we're doing as the Montessori teacher in a Montessori environment is to empower the child. We empower the child instead of the teacher being the one doing the work. The teacher becomes the child becomes becomes an active participant. In fact, the child becomes the active participant, exploring, manipulating materials, and discovering concept through the hands-on experience that the child is having. The kind of example I've given now, when I introduce that material up till the number, what's it called now? The number 3 or 4, you now just hand over the activity to the child. You're handing over, the child becomes the active participant in that learning process. Also, what we're doing is we are encouraging independence. When we shift activity, when we shift the learning process and allow the child to own the learning process, Montessori education is nurturing self-motivation. The Montessori method, as you transfer this lesson activity, is also nurturing confidence, is nurturing the love for learning, rather than being a passive, receptive individual of the knowledge. When you stand and you are in control of the teaching as a teacher, the child can passively learn. That's not what we want. We want the child to own that learning process. And this is what we achieve when we're able to transfer the activity to the child. All right. The next slide. Please give me a minute. I need my phone. Okay. What's my time here? Clock. 30 minutes. All right, sorry about that. Okay. So the next slide talks about the difference, a profound difference. The objects are not, don't forget we're discussing here at the Montessori teacher. The objects are not an aid for the mistress, who has to explain. They do not constitute the means of the teaching. I've explained this earlier. We are not to take over the learning. We are not to own the learning. We start it and then we transfer it to the child. Our role is they are an aid for the child, who chooses them for himself, takes possession of them, uses them, and employ himself with them according to his tendencies and needs, just as long as he's interested in them. It is the child who uses them Who is the Montessori classroom? The learning materials are designed as aids for the child, not for the teacher. So what this means is the child will choose materials based on their interests and their developmental needs. Please, I'm making myself clear. We present activities, but in all the materials we have in the environment, you have your plan as what I mentioned. I've said it severally before now. I call it the individual learning plans. So you have activities. So maybe, for instance, you want to teach them how to blend three-letter words in literacy, how to start up the concept of simple addition in math, how to what other thing do we do? Let me just speak math and English. But in all this process, in the environment, we have different activities that is helping the child to develop and refine movement skill, fine motor skill, develop independence, develop social cohesion, develop, different skills like we've discussed before now. The classroom is not just about the academic, it's the holistic. So while you have your teacher plan activity, children will be drawn to different activities in the environment based on their sensitive period. So we need to observe and ensure that the child is going for this material because that's what the sensitive period is calling them to do. So ours is to guide them and to support them. The materials, like I said earlier on, are self-correcting, they are hands-on, and they allow independent learning. So the teacher does not directly instruct the environment, and as a Montessori teacher is to observe and to guide them when it is necessary. All right, let's go on. Everything we have in all the other slide is just all that I've talked about. The functions of the teacher. She must know very well the work which is expected from her, and the function of the material, which is a means of development. Once you start your teaching practice, we're going to have something that will develop, you develop it like a journal. It is called the material, practicing of using the material. So you start to practice how to present the materials. You have your step-by-step lesson plan with the modules that I'm giving to you. You will sit in the classroom and act like important that you practice, because if you do not, there are times you want to present these activities to the child, the activity to the child, and you're doing it, it's not a correct presentation. I remember there was a time I went into the class and the teacher was presenting a particular activity and she was doing complete, let me use the word rubbish, permit me. It is because she didn't practice. If you know you have a planned active practice ahead, you go to the material, you ensure the materials are complete, everything is checked and ticked, and practice how you're going to take it to the table, how you present it. If you do not, you're actually going to alter the order of presentation, and that can disturb the child's learning. So what is it that is expected? What is expected? What is expected of us is she is in the main. In other words, the teacher is the connecting link between the material and the child, between the activity and the child. We as the teacher is the connecting link. We're linking the child to the activity. In our Montessori system, our role as teacher does nothing more than facilitate. We facilitate and we make clear to the child the very active, prolonged work which is reserved for him in choosing the objects and employing himself with them. Typically, what we do in the Montessori environment with the ground rules, you let them know. It is often very clear, and I tell you again and again, you will experience it if you find yourself in a proper Montessori classroom. During your ground rules, you let them know if you have not been introduced to a particular material, do not use it. You can use it once you are ready. And you will also tell them, if you wish to know about this activity, you let me know so I can show it to you, and then you can use it. So what you're doing in that environment, you're letting them know we all own this environment. We are here as a community. We are here to learn. And anything you want to learn, trust me, you are able to learn. When children have this kind of opportunity and clarity, you don't have issues with being unruly or naughtiness. Don't worry, we'll get to a place where it is possible to have 1 or 2 children like that. And it will amaze you what Montessori said. When we get there, I will talk about that. So how is this achieved? How are we able to achieve this? When we say we are the link between the child and the material, in other words, between the child and the learning activity, how are we able to achieve facilitating and ensuring learning is taking place with the material? We should be well acquainted with the material. Practice, practice, practice. Acquire exact of the technique for the presentation of the material. Acquire exact knowledge of the treatment of the child. Absolutely important. And we should be able to study general principles of the highest importance for guiding. My network is going to go off a bit because the power just went off now, and my Wi-Fi. Just let me know. Are you still hearing me?
Yes,
Yes,
ma.
ma.
I am
Yes,
still
ma'am.
here.
We can
Okay.
hear you, ma.
Yes,
All
ma,
right,
we
thank
can.
you. Thank you. So we should be able to study general principles of the highest importance for guiding our practice. So get used to the material, know all the knowledge around the material you're going to work with the child. Wow, it's going to rain. Wow. All right, it's very windy here out here now. And also know the principle behind the practice. Absolutely very important. There are ethics around what we're doing, and we need to get it right. The knowledge of the material. I've been saying that. This slide is telling us again. As a Montessori teacher, we must exercise ourselves with the material for a long time, trying in this way to form an estimate by her experience of the difficulties or the interest which every piece of material may present, trying to interpret, however imperfectly, the impressions which the child may receive from it. How would we be able to facilitate the child's learning? How would we be able to guide the child learning? The child's learning. How would we be able to support the child's learning when we ourselves don't know a lot about the materials in our classroom?
I can no longer hear anything. It's completely off.
Okay.
I can still hear from my own end, ma'am.
Yes, I can
Okay.
still hear from my end too. I think it's from her end.
Okay, so it's from her end. All right.
Mm.
Right. So, except we know a lot about the material, then we won't be able to achieve it. So we need to practice and practice and practice. Absolutely very important. As I'm not in the Montessori classroom with the teachers, but at days I just go into the class. I want to refresh my memory. I want to sit and watch. And sometimes I just sit there and I work with the materials. I carry my module and I'm going through it. Because if I'm going into the class to observe the teachers, when they are not presenting well, then I will not be able to correct them or support them in doing that. So it is very important that we work on that. Maintenance of orderliness. As a Montessori teacher, besides putting the child in touch with the material, also puts him in touch, we also put him with the arrangement of his surroundings. As a Montessori teacher, we impose on the child the rule on which is based an external disciplinary organization. Very simple in character, but sufficient is ground rules. As a guide, there is what we call the Montessori ground rule. In fact, what Montessori, one of the major Maria Montessori ground rules is every object must have a definite place where it is kept and where it remains and when it is not in use. Every material must have a definite place where it is kept and where it remains when it is not in use. And that's part of the order you find in a Montessori environment. So the children come to that environment and they find the material there all the time. They are not ruffled. So the kind of thing that happens in a typical Montessori environment is that do I still have all of you here?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, ma.
When the power goes. All right, thank you. Thank you. So the kind of thing that happens is oftentimes because children, because they have to use the material, we don't have, in a Montessori environment, because we are creating order, we're creating children to wait, to take turns, and to be able to develop that patience, to wait for someone to finish using a lesson material before they use it. We only have one of each activity. We do not have two at a time. So you can imagine in a classroom where you have 24 children. They always plan ahead. I'm telling you, from today, maybe class is going, we're having the work cycle. They will be telling themselves that I'm going to use the material next. And they already have their name tag and they're waiting. They take turns. If they're not able to use that material today, they are waiting forward to tomorrow. Once they are coming to class, because different Montessori classes, we use different method, or Montessori environment, we use different method. In our own school, once the children come into school, even before normal class activity starts, before we have our circle time, they are allowed to work with materials. So rather than come to school, maybe teachers are still getting ready, preparing their tables. It's not 8 o'clock yet. A child that's come in at 7:30 can start working. So the child will come, drop his or her bag, and go straight, pick his mat, pick his name tag, put it on the space where he's going to work, and go and pick the material. Maybe he's beating, maybe he's pouring activity, maybe he's folding of clothes, from the practical area. Maybe he's building of block from the sensorial area. So a child that is coming to school the next day because he couldn't carry out an activity yesterday, when he arrives in the class, he wants to work with the pouring activity. He goes straight to where he's supposed to be because he knows where he's supposed to be. Imagine what happens to that child. He gets there and he can't find the material there. Well, if that happens, we are already distorting order. So what typically happens, the truth is, a lot of Montessori teachers, even in my school, people, because it can be a little bit tasking to do that activity, but a lot of them run away from doing it. Every day, the beginning of class, you look through all your materials and ensure everything is placed, materials are complete. When the day is over, whether you close at 3 or 2 or whatever, you have to check all the materials again, arrange it back. with your assistant. By this time, if you have, once you are presented to the children, they already know how to do this thing. You will call them to help you, and you arrange so that when they come back the next day, they meet the materials the way it's supposed to be. That's what we mean when we talk about maintenance of orderliness. The material, the activity, everything is in place the way it's supposed to be. So don't forget that ground rule by Maria Montessori. Every object must have a definite place where it is kept and where it remains when it is not in use. Though these are some examples that we could use with the children. Sorry, permit me. I'm having issue with. I don't know what's happening to my. It's not moving. Okay. I have a lot of my gadgets that is misfunctioning tonight, but it is okay. So Montessori was very clear about the child always needing to fulfill the full circle of activity, never passing the material on to another child without it being put away first. You know, I've said that before. They have to learn to complete their circle of activity. You want to work with the material, go to the shelf, and the place you start the spoon, but then when you now come tomorrow, you want to use it. You know how you feel when you go to where the spoon is supposed to be and it's not there. You'll be frustrated. That's exactly what happens also in a Montessori environment. All right. Care of the environment. As the Montessori teachers, we are the keeper and the custodian of the environment. We create the beauty and the atmosphere, we create the reality, and we acknowledge nature. So as much as possible, we are the custodian. And together with the children, we work to take care of the environment. So what we want to do is, as much as possible, ensure that we create reality in the environment, and also acknowledge nature. How do we acknowledge nature? I shared this last class. Try as much as possible to have nature around the class. You can have plants, you can have birds, maybe a parrot. You can just have it in one corner, or you can have a fish pond where the children can come. Part of the activity in the class is to feed the fish. They can take turns to carry out that activity and also help to water the plant and care for the plant. And what you're doing with the children this way is giving them awareness of how to take care of the environment. Also, as a Montessori teacher, we are invigilators. The mistress, in other words, the Montessori teacher, keeps watch so that the child who is absorbed in his work is not disturbed by any companion, not disturbed by another child. This office of guardian angel of minds concentrated in effort, which are to elevate, is one of the most solemn duties of the teacher. So we want to ensure that the child is not interrupted when learning is taking place. The child who is not using a material appropriately, we're able to know how to interrupt that child. A child who looks like he's playing with the material, like I said earlier on, we look at ways by which we can intervene and ensure that the child is doing the right thing with the material. All right. Then our role as giving lessons. Our role as the teacher must distinguish between two different periods. So as the teacher, as the Montessori teacher, they also call us directors in the class, as the facilitators, we have two different periods when learning is taking place. The first, she must in the first, she puts the child into communication with the material, initiates him into its use. And that's when you present the activity to the child. Then secondly, she intervenes to enlighten the child who has already succeeded through his spontaneous exertions in distinguishing the differences between things. Those are sometimes, let me give you a typical example. Sometimes because in a Montessori environment, children will always learn quickly and easily. They will watch you present the activity at a time and they just feel they know how to use it. And you want to present it to them. Some will want to just go ahead and use it. You'll be calm and watch them. Then once they're not doing it right, you tell them, okay, well, I can see you have an idea. Let me show it to you what this is supposed to be. And then you now come in and initiate it and gives. And this is very similar. It links to the transference of activity that we discussed earlier on. How the teacher's role will change from being very passive to introducing the child to the environment or to the material. It's from being passive, being a passive observer to intervening when it is necessary to help develop the child learning. It is absolutely important that we do a lot of observation, we do a lot of invigilation so that we can intervene when it is necessary. Now, the moment of presentation, when we're presenting activity or when we need to present an activity, especially our teacher plan activity. As a Montessori teacher, we are not to interrupt a busy child to present a lesson. The child must be in a receptive mood and interested by the lesson to be presented. I know you will feel like, what kind of wala is this now? These children will not listen. And then you will not leave a child by himself. When will he now be ready? They are always eager to learn because that's what the Montessori environment will do to the child. Learning is interesting. Learning is fun. Learning is so intentional and is so purposeful. So it's not going to be a problem. I gave you an example of how I do it. I'm already presenting to the, so I have, most of the time, maybe we are 3 in the class. Each of us, we would have planned as teachers the children we're going to present to. And I write their names down. And as they come to class, they are working, they're already busy with other materials. I'll just tell the child, the first child I want to work with, I have it in my journal, and I'll go whisper to the child, I have an activity to present to you. Let me know when you are ready. I want you to finish up so that I can present to you. Sometimes even before you finish, you say, yes, I am ready. It's almost like a competition. I want to be the first to know this new lesson. Or they will tell you, okay. So presentation must correspond to the child's inner needs. If it is not, we're the ones that will not enjoy the process because the child will not enjoy the learning. And it's always a whole lot of work for us as teachers. Presenting a lesson. A child's attention should be on the object of the lesson. Verbal instructions are simple and limited to what is necessary. So don't do too much talking, no too much drama. When it's too dramatic, you take attention away from the purpose of the lesson. So as much as possible, you are calm with your presentation. You are present with your presentation. Don't overstimulate the child so that the goal for the lesson will be achieved. You will see this when we look at practical ways of presenting activity. Always allow for repetition and exploration. Never say, will you never stop working with this material? If the child does not stop working with that activity, then the child's inner drive for learning concerning that particular work is not achieved yet. So let the child keep doing it. Even if the child wants to do it again, you tell the child, oh, once I'm done with the presentation of this new lesson, you can go back to work with that activity. And in the presentation of your lesson, observation and note-taking is absolutely important. You will always have your journal that you have to take notes to know if you need to present the activity again or if the child is not good with the learning. Non-interference. Absolutely important. What are the things that can interfere the child's learning? I mean, that can interfere the process of learning. It is the spiritual part of that fatal intervention of the adult who wants to substitute herself for the child and act for him. And in doing so, erect the most serious obstacle to his development. In other words, when we want to do it for the child. And the truth is, oftentimes when the child is not getting it right, we are quick to want to, quickly, because of course that's the default mode that we are as adults around children. We want to quickly fix it so we can go on to the next thing. If we do that, we are disrupting that process of development. You remember life cycle of butterfly. A lot of us know that life cycle, where they tell you that the I think after caterpillar is the pupa. Yeah, I think so. The pupa, that's when the butterfly is like in the cocoon and ready to come out and fly like a butterfly. Sometimes, if you've seen, we read a story. In fact, this one was my teacher during my training that gave us that story, and said that in one of their nurseries, they wanted the children to really see the stages of the life cycle of a butterfly. And the butterfly was in that cocoon stage. Every morning when the children come to class, they will go to where and by perchance, they got there one day and saw that the butterfly was already struggling inside the cocoon, that stage where it's supposed to break open and then come out by itself. And one of the children, couldn't just hold it like, oh, it's as if it's struggling. Let me help this butterfly to come out from this sack. And it just punched it. And the butterfly died. The process was not complete. It's the same thing with human. When we carry our babies in our womb, when that time that is appointed for the child to come forth, the appointed of God for the sac, that amniotic fluid where the child is put for how many weeks, months in the womb. When the time is ripe, sorry, my timer is stop. When the time is ripe, the sac will burst open by itself. Yes, there are some times if a woman is in labor for too long, the doctor may come to now break the water so that the baby can be released. But if it happens naturally, oftentimes, it's always a very, very easy process. And that's the way it is. I'm just giving an example of what happened when we're talking about non-interference. There are other things also that can interfere with a child's learning. And that's why in a Montessori environment, the way we dress matters a lot. We are not overly, overpowering the presence around the child. If you come, in fact, in a Montessori environment, they do not accept long jewelries, fancy nails, long nails with polished and it's all looking claw. tattoos and all that. If you have it, you have to cover it so that it doesn't distract the child's learning. As much as possible, you want the child to be focused without any form of distraction. All right, please permit me. I forgot to put water here, so I want to take water. Back. I am back. I am back. Spiritual preparation. You remember, was it in the last class or the class before? I was talking about spiritual preparation, and I said, in a sense, it's not talking about this religious spirituality, but preparing yourself to be present in the class. You know, when we say present, to be here now, so that nothing else will distract you in the process. A teacher, therefore, who would think that he could prepare himself for his mission through study alone would be mistaken. The first thing required of a teacher is that he be rightly disposed for his task. This is where reflective practice come to play. Because when we're talking about Montessori method, especially if you're transiting from the traditional method to Montessori method, you need a lot of patience. You need a lot of mind reset because it's a whole different game. But by the time you get it, honestly, you will enjoy the process. Maria Montessori emphasized that teaching is not just about academic preparation, but it is about the inner transformation. So as a teacher, you have to be transformed inwardly to be able to carry out this practice appropriately. A Montessori teacher must cultivate the right mindset, must cultivate the right, must have that disposition to guide children effectively. So what are the various aspects of spiritual preparation for us as Montessori teachers? Self-reflection and inner growth is absolutely very important. The teacher must develop patience. The teacher must develop humility. The teacher must develop respect for the child's natural development. If you do not validate children's natural um, tendencies, their potentialities, and the natural development, it will be difficult for you to work with them in a Montessori environment because you won't have that patience. In fact, you compare other children with themselves, you will not be able to work in that environment. So there's a whole lot of self-reflection and inner growth. It's a process of unlearning, is a process of relearning so that you can actually do what you're supposed to do effectively in that learning environment. We have to let go of our ego and control. One of the things that we bring into our practice as traditional teachers is that ego as a teacher, that control that we have as a teacher. A lot of us, you are used to this, that parents will say, when they tell their children, I will tell your teacher, or I will tell Mrs. Agumbi, that the child will just be shaking. You know, that's not our goal. Yes, we want our children to have confidence in us, but we don't want to be to them like a terror. Instead of being the center of attention, when we're talking about spiritual preparation as a teacher, instead of being the center of attention, the teacher must step back, observe, and trust the child's ability to learn. We step back, we observe, and we trust the child's ability to learn. Excuse me. Another aspect is we need to have this deep respect for the child. Respect the child's learning. It's not that we're not saying that the child is now the superior. No. But like respect that developmental stages that children go through their learning. The teacher must view the child as a unique, capable individual. Look at the child as a unique, capable individual. Don't look at the child as an empty vessel to be filled with knowledge. If you do that, then we'll not be able to achieve the goal. They are not empty, but they have a process in their learning. When we're talking about spiritual preparation, we need to have emotional and mental readiness. Emotional and mental readiness is absolutely very important. As a Montessori teacher, we must remain calm, we must remain present, and we must be open. Be calm, be present, be open, creating a peaceful and a nurturing learning environment. Create that peaceful and learning environment. When we're able to do this, it will help us to achieve our goal as a Montessori teacher. Montessori teachers will focus on preparing themselves emotionally, preparing themselves spiritually to serve the child's growth. That's how you can enjoy learning or teaching in a Montessori environment. We must insist on the fact that a teacher must prepare himself internally, interiorly, by systematically studying himself so that he can tear out his deeply rooted defects, those in fact which impedes his relationship with the children. In order to discover this subconscious feeling, we have a need of special kind of instructions. We must see ourselves as another sees us. If you are not a patient teacher, that's why you could, those kind, we discussed that in one of our class, that woman that was beating a 3-year-old child or so because the child could not write. A lot of us saw that video, it went viral. If you are not able to carry out reflective practice and work on your emotion, you will not have enough patience to be able to work with the children. I had one very terrible experience when I started my school then. It was not even a Montessori school then, but I just started. I think we had about maybe 10 children in the playgroup class. And one of the teachers I employed beat a 3-year-old child because the child weed on himself. Beat him so much. I didn't know about it. I was in my office. It was the parents that came. I was still in the school. She came and she was crying profusely and lifted up the child's shirt. And I saw the mark of this. I don't even know what she used to beat the child. Of course, you can imagine what happened to that parent, that child, that teacher. It was a serious matter. Unfortunately, that child was my number one student, aside from my last baby that was the 001. That boy was 002 in the admission. And I know what it took me. I went with the whole community to go and beg the mother. So if you are not a patient individual, you won't be able to work with children of that age. So you need to be able to check yourself to know if you are capable. That's the same thing we have on this slide. And then I talked about reflective practice. This is where we are able to reflect on our practice. Take time to sit and ask yourself, what am I supposed to do to myself to be present in the classroom? What am I supposed to do to myself to practice all we have talked about when we talk about the Montessori teacher and the child and the environment? As a teacher, we are the link between the child in the environment and the lessons that the child would acquire through the material. So what am I supposed to do to myself to ensure that I don't become a hindrance to the learning that it's supposed to take in that environment? Reflective practice will help you to do that. The vision of the teacher should be at once precise like that of a scientist and spiritual like that of a saint. The preparation for science and the preparation of sanctity for the preparation for science and the preparation of sanctity should for a new soul. For the attitude of the teacher should be at once positive, scientific, and spiritual. So practice is important. Look into yourself. Okay, light is back. Check yourself and ensure that you have all that it takes to be able to do all that you need to do. All right. So with that, we've come to the end of this slide. We'll go to the next one. This is our homework. Consider the beams in your eyes. You know that scripture that says, before you take out the speck in somebody's eyes, you consider the log, the beam in your own eyes. What are they, and what will you need to do to spiritually prepare? So look at yourself inwardly and tell yourself, what am I struggling with? Am I impatient? Do I need to learn to be calm? Do I need to learn to be present so that you can be able to effectively ensure learning is taking place in the environment? I already sent these lectures to us. Please do well to read them. It will be helpful for your assignment. All right. So I want to stop sharing and ask if there's any question. Any question as I get ready to share the next slide? Why am I still here? Okay. All right, if there's no question, let's move on quickly.
Hello, ma. I have a question, ma, if you remember.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me first appreciate you on the illumination about bringing children together and supporting them in order to be able to use the materials properly. My question now is, naturally, children have this destructive tendency. How do we ensure that most of these materials are not destroyed, or let me use obstructed by these little children?
Mm.
Are we keeping them somewhere? Are we giving them the ground rules that will take effect almost immediately for them to adhere to? I just want to know how to balance that area in keeping those
Yeah.
materials away from being destroyed. Thank you.
Yeah. Very good question, Ma. It's always a concern, and it's part of the practice, the things we'll have to consider in our reflective practice. So let me go straight on to tell you that when the children coming into the environment in the beginning of the week, they're coming in the beginning of the session, is always very chaotic. And I'll use that word chaotic. But if you are able to prepare adequately, what children need is to be reminded. You have ground rules in place, and you remind them frequently. In fact, in the first period when we resume, we have our circle time like 3 times during the school period. We share it out, like maybe every 1.5 hours, we'll come together again and have a circle time so that we can bring the children back into the present and go over what we have said in the morning. So the first 2 weeks, honestly, is not often more than that. First 2 weeks. When they come in the first week, you know, the excitement of everything in the environment will be getting to them.
Yeah.
In fact, initially, when I started this process, we used to cover up. We don't keep the materials away. It's open plan. You have all the materials on the shelf and the children can see everything. But we just, and honestly, once you tell them first time, second time, third time, they listen. With the exception of children, maybe they are special needs. Children that, you know, they would need special people to be around them to be able to control them. But honestly, with experience, it doesn't go beyond 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The moment you do that, they don't go to the place you don't tell them. You already said, I've not presented that. And like I said, in a Montessori environment, it's vertical grouping. The vertical grouping, you have older children. So some are presented to some activity while some are not. So you find you are presenting an activity to the child, another child who is not age appropriate for that will just sit and be watching. And with experience, when they are done, they return it, the child does not go there. The one that has not been presented, because the child is not even in the sensitive period for that anyway. So they won't go to that place. That's just how it works. I know if we're thinking about it now, it looks like how possible. But once you start to practice, you will see that it is possible. Did I answer
Thank
your
you very much for the explanation. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay.
I'm satisfied with the explanation.
All right.
Thank you.
Hello, ma.
Yes.
Good evening once
Mr.
again.
Good evening.
Please, during the course of the lecture, you spoke about the child coming early and going to work with the material.
Yes.
And you also talked about them having tag. This one says, I'll go to the material next. So I want to ask, if the child was working on the material and then let up, and a child that was scheduled maybe like 3 individuals away now comes early and wants to work with the material, do you allow the child to go there? And what if the person that was working with it returns and still wants to work with the material? How do you reconcile that?
No, if the person that was working with it initially
Don't stop.
is done already and returns it, you can't go back to it again. His own
For the day.
circle of activity is done, yes.
Okay.
The child who wants to do it next would have said to that child, I'm going to work with this material after you. So the child knows. I've sat down in a class where I see that they resolve the problem themselves. So another child will come. Once the child is going to return it, another child will quickly follow like he wants to pick it. And the child will say, no, Ayomide said he's going to use it after me. And he will not allow that child to use it till Ayomide comes. So that's not always an issue. And they know that once you are done, you don't go back again and say you still want to use it. They give, honestly, the way it works, I used to think that, and adults, we disturb ourselves with this thing, you know, how we can't take turns and all that. Then the next day you are talking about, the ones that plan that he's going to use it tomorrow, they already know if you are not in the class early, somebody else that comes before you will not wait for you to come to use. The one that comes first, definitely.
Papa, why not use it? Now I don't do 9:30. No, not be so now, it's 9:30.
Huh? Are you talking to me?
Oh, no, ma, sorry, ma.
I don't think
No,
so,
ma.
ma.
Oh, okay. Her line was all right. So they know that once they are not available, those who are available will use the material. I know my parents used to say that, the child is saying, Mommy, I want to leave early. I don't want to be late. I have work to do. They rush to come to school so that they can work with their. Let's rush quickly through this next slides. All right. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, ma, you did. Thank you.
All right. Normalization. I've mentioned this briefly in one of our discussion. Okay. Did I? Yes. I mentioned this briefly. And what normalization is. Children do not get their abilities through heredity, but they possess the potentialities for development. This development has a precise order and follows well-determined laws of growth. You remember we said this when we're looking at the natural tendencies of man. So normalization in Montessori refers to the process where a child, through meaningful work and concentration, is a process where a child, through meaningful work and concentration, will develop self-discipline, will develop independence, and a love for learning. That's normalization. For normalization to take place, there must be meaningful work going on. And that meaningful work must get the child to concentrate. And what that is doing is that it develops self-discipline, it develops independence, and develop a love for learning, which is why I said to us in one of our teachings that that's why we start to introduce the children to the Montessori environment from the practical life area. Number one is an area that they are familiar with, because most of the activities there, that's why we also call it the activities of everyday living. They are things they are used to in the home environment, in around them. Pouring, and transferring, folding, threading, beading, all these things that is commonly seen around them. When this meaningful work is going on and the child is concentrated in the activity, self-discipline will take place and independence will take place and a love for learning is developed. All that activity that is happening in the practical area, we're not just doing it because we want to occupy the children. It is because it is like a bedrock to all the other learnings that they are going to encounter. It's a bedrock for the learning they will encounter in math, in literacy, in science, in geography. All the activities there will help them through that learning process. All right? So this transformation can only occur naturally when a child is truly given the right environment and also given the freedom to follow their interests. You remember our spiritual embryo? You should remember now, the spiritual embryo is the concept that a child is born with a potential for development, not preset abilities. You know, we're comparing it with the heredity in animals. So there are no preset abilities, but the potentials are there. However, the potential will not surface if we don't give the appropriate opportunity, the environment, meaningful work, concentration to develop self-discipline, independence, and then they now begin to love learning. And I said then that like a physical embryo, where a child is following the biological laws for growth, the same thing happens for normalization to take place. The child's inner self will unfold naturally. And this is being shaped by the experiences that the child is having in the environment. So that's normalization for you. How does normalization happen? Number one, there must be freedom and order. You know what we discussed in our last class when we're talking about the 6 basic components of a favorable environment. There should be freedom and order. Freedom to move, but the freedom to move must come with independence too. A well-prepared environment that allows the child to choose meaningful activities. There should be deep concentration. So that activity must be meaningful enough to create concentration and focus. They are engaged in purposeful work that leads to focus and self-discipline. Of course, transformation must take place. The kind of transformation that will cause the child to be calm, that will cause the child to be independent, and cause the child to be socially aware is absolutely important. When this is in place, then normalization will take place. All right? The psychic embryo. This is another terminology, and it's important that we take note of that. The delicate construction of the psychic take place in an environment that is ill prepared for it today. It meets with many obstacles. So when we're talking about the psychic environment, is that seat for mental development, the seat for emotional development. That's why you have a lot of adults today who are struggling with emotional intelligence. And you're having issues not only in the workplace, even in marriages. But when the child is in an environment where the psychic embryo is being prepared effectively, then they won't have these challenges. Maria Montessori used the term psychic embryo to describe the mental and emotional development of a child from birth to about 3 years old. The mental and emotional development of a child from birth to around 3 years old. So again, just like the physical embryo develops in the womb, the psychic embryo represents the early formation of a child's mind, early formation of a child's personality, early formation of a child's intelligence. And this is achieved through the interaction with their environment. If you listen to that clip I sent to you on the platform, that podcast, that's what that woman was saying there, talking about the environment you provide for children between the age group 0 to 6. So the psychic embryo represents the early formation of the child's mind, personality, and intelligence through the interactions in their environment. So now again, we're talking about ensuring that we provide appropriate environment that will help the mental and emotional development of the child, because it's needed for learning. Now you see, when we talked about the fact that it is not just for you to teach them dimension, shapes, and color. There are a whole lot that is working together for them to learn, and all of it must be like a total well-being must be in place. So a child is born with the capacity to develop, but their mind is not preformed. They absorb everything from their surrounding, shaping their identity and intellect. And it is our job and our duty to ensure that we take care of this effectively. So when we talk about normalization, we can't but talk about deviation. Deviation is a term that Maria Montessori used to describe behaviors that arises when a child's natural development is hindered by obstacles in the environment. So a child is deviated when the environment is not making adequate provision for the child's natural path for learning and development. That's what this quote is telling us, straight. So take note of that. This deviation occurs when the psychic embryo, that seat that takes care of mental development, the child's developed mind, takes care of emotional development. When that psychic embryo encounters challenges, particularly between the age group 0 to 3 years. So you see why that age group is very delicate. We must take absolute care of it. So what are the causes of deviation with all that I have said? Lack of prepared environment. When the environment is not prepared to take care of that learning, that child will be frustrated. That child will be restless. That child will be dependent. Those kind of children are always attached. If the surrounding is not supporting exploration and independence, the child is frustrated. And then you'll be saying the child is naughty. When there's excessive adult control, children want to learn by themselves. They want to learn at their pace. If we don't give them that opportunity, when we over-direct them, when we are constantly interfering and we are suppressing the child's natural desire to learn and develop self-discipline, deviation will occur. So we must ensure that we give children the opportunity to develop so that normalization will take place. Repression come about when the forces of growth, the creative forces of the psychic personalities are impeded, when they are hindered. Maria Montessori defined repression as the blocking of a child's natural developmental drives. When there is a blockage, when there are obstacles, and these obstacles, number one, can be created by the adults. Number two, can be created by the environment, which of us is supposed to be taken care of by the adult. Their natural developmental journey or drive is being hindered. Repression is taking place. And what it's doing is preventing them from engaging in the activities that is necessary for their growth. When a child's creative and psychological energies are restricted, their development is hindered. And again, this will lead to frustration, this will lead to dependency, and it will lead to behavioral issues. So our job is to ensure that children are not repressed. Please give me a minute. I need to set up something. Just a minute. So don't forget what I said. For repression not to take place, we must reduce excessive adult control in the learning environment. When you constantly direct, constantly limit the child choices, you are suppressing their natural desire for exploration and independence. Rather than doing that, provide for them meaningful work in the environment that they will be engaged in and they will be concentrated in. When there's lack of movement, lack of freedom for movement and work, you are repressing the child. When we overemphasize on discipline instead of self-regulation, we are repressing. So you say, sit down there, sit down in that corner. I don't want you to stand up from there. You can actually engage them meaningfully. So if a child is being naughty in a particular activity, you can look for another way to engage them so that they can use that energy appropriately. I was discussing that. I think it was Bosse that was asking that question in the last class. Because self-regulation is very key. When we're talking about self-regulation, we're talking about our emotions. When the child knows when to be calm, when the child knows, because we are what we feel. Emotion is part of us. We can't shush it away, but we can regulate it. And nobody can regulate your emotion for you. You need to learn how to self-regulate. And that's why you find that as a Montessori teacher, you are also a role model in the environment. If you do not know how to self-regulate, you can't help other children that you work with. So for repression not to take place, we must have enough opportunities for meaningful work. When children are not given engaging tasks that match their developmental needs, they will become restless, they will become disinterested, they will become disruptive, because you are not giving them what their inner drive is desiring. All right? So this is also talking about the repression. All psychic disorders of children stem from two sources. Number one, first source is mental starvation. when there is mental starvation, when they are not exploring, when they are not in problem-solving mode through their exploration and manipulative activities going with materials. And then secondly, second source is lack of activity. The children cannot develop because all the acquisition come through experiences in their environment. If they are made to sit still and forbidden to move and touch, their natural activity is repressed. And we don't want that. We don't want that, because it's also going to affect you as the teacher. What are the effects of repression? I think that's very self-explanatory. When a child is repressed, a repressed person cannot develop normally. Repression come, and repression can come in so many ways. Parents can repress children. Adults, caregivers, primary caregivers, the teachers can repress children. Repression comes from us unconsciously treating, the way we treat our children unconsciously. For instance, children cannot develop when parents do everything for them. They need to develop through their own activity. So when a child is in a growing environment and the child, everything is done for the child. You feed the child, you open the child's mouth, you put the spoon in the child's mouth. If it's possible, you can even chew it for the child. The child can carry, sometimes I will tell parents, the child is coming to school, they will carry bag, and the child will just be strolling away. So have you seen where children sometimes, they are fighting with the parents? Give me my bag, I want to carry it. And they will say,
Yes, oh.
you've seen that. Because they want to do it by themselves. But parents will not allow. So we repress. They tell us that we always say children like to do adult things, because that's how we are built. And that's why in a Montessori environment, we have role play corners, we have kitchen corners. Children will role play cooking, role play folding clothes, role play hair, making hair, all the things adults do, because it's part of their growth journey. All right. So correction of deviation, how can we correct? We must not attempt to correct their deviation. What should we do? Instead, we must give them a more normal life whereby their bodies and their minds can be active in an environment that contains many motives of activity. We've talked about this already, so let me rush to it. Also, we must give the children freedom and relaxation from continuous intervention by adults. Give them the right environment. Give them relaxation and freedom from others. This is an indirect treatment. It is not the correction of the individual, but a preparation for life. So you are actually correcting the deviation, but not the child. So you are not, it is different for you to say, this child, I don't know what's wrong with you. You are just so naughty. Sit down there and hold your mouth. And then the child, you tell them, hold your lips. That's not the way to correct the deviation. Rather, you give them the opportunity in the environment for growth to take place. All right? If you have given children freedom, sorry, I need to put on my fan. Okay, I have this fan here. This rain is heavy where I am here. Is it raining at your place there?
Oh, no.
Me, I'm in
No,
Ogun State.
ma. No
Okay,
rain.
I'm in Ogun State, so it's raining heavily here. So the power is off now. My AC is off. So if you have given children freedom and a good environment and they are still disorderly, this is what I wanted you to see. Look at what Maria Montessori said on this slide. Then you must pray to God to help you, because then these hot children cannot be helped without a miracle. All we can do then is wait for the grace of God. Do all you can and then wait for the grace of God. So there are exceptions. This is taken from one of her books. I told you that she was a Catholic, so she had the God factor also working for her. There are exceptions, but they can't, in a class of 24, you can't have 10 children like this. Maybe you have 2 or 3. And don't forget that there are children in spectrums, autism. Unfortunately, the thing is so common these days. I think it's food and all the chemicals in the bodies of adults, more children are beginning to come to life with different mini spectrums of special needs. Concentration. This is the point from which everything comes. When a given day, one child may concentrate, on another day, another child. Little by little, you will observe the phenomenon of real concentration, and good will start coming out of this concentration, expressed in interesting work in which all faculties are concentrated. Now, it's so interesting. When they come into school in the new session, you start to see this process from like 4, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. You will love the classroom. You will just come, you will see all of them, you enter the class. Sometimes if I'm there as a visitor, they're oblivious of me. Remember that video I showed us on the platform, the video recording I did? All of them, I didn't even plan that I was coming to the class. I think I told the teacher the day before, and I entered. Everything was going till I finished my recording. Nobody was looking at me. They were all just intense doing their work. This thing has taken place, concentration. And you will just love your class. You will love and love your class. All right? So concentration is something we look forward to. But the moment you present the right environment, you will see this play, and you will love the experience that is taking place. So look at this, the examples we have talked about, the two streams of energies. Can you see it? The physical energy of the body. Excuse me. Okay, so you can see these two streams of energy, the physical energy of the body, the mental energy of intelligence. So you can see this blue line, that's the physical. The red one is the mental. When there is obstacles here, and what are the obstacles? The environment and the adults in the environment. If they are obstructing these energies, then repression will take place. Then deviation will take place. But the moment we're able to provide adequate opportunity in the environment, the forces that bring about repression and deviation is the environment and the adult. Once we're able to adjust it, concentration takes place, and then you have normalization. And you know what normalization is? That natural path for learning is developed because meaningful work is taking place. Concentration is developed. Self-discipline comes to stay, and then learning takes place. So our role is to ensure that we remove every obstacle and deal with this repression and deviation. Once that is taken care of, then we have children who are good and happy to learn. And that's what we have here. We have the new child. When this new child appears, education is possible. He is now readjusted. We can educate him because he is in a condition in which he can develop and in which he has much to develop. He is now ready to learn. This is supposed to be our goal. A child must develop through his own work activity, his own activity. This work is an inner work, Concentration connects the exercises with something inside. If the creative energies of the child are disconnected or broken, concentration brings a new connection that results to normality. And that's the normalization we're talking about. What are the characteristics of normalization that occurs? What are the things we will see? The child will work with engaged interest, exactness, will work with peace, will work with happiness, and work with social sentiment. This is what we want to see in our children. When this is happening, learning will take, you will love your own experience as a teacher because your teaching becomes so stressless. And I'm telling you this by experience. All these things I'm telling you, I'm not telling you theory. I have taught in the class. It's because I don't know how busy I've been these days. In fact, when we're resuming this session, I wanted to take up a class by myself, one nursery class, just to have the experience all over again. So I'm not telling you theory. There are things that I've experienced myself. So many abnormalities. When there is repression, when there is deviation, there will be disorderliness, there will be destructive behavior, and there will be excessive attachment. Children should not be, it is okay for them to have confidence in their teachers, but they must not be unnecessarily attached to teachers where they are not able to do anything except that teacher is around. It doesn't mean you are a favorite. Then you are not actually helping that child. Concentration is the reconstruction of the personality, bringing the ability to develop normally. I'm sure you can answer this question. What can we do to bring about this reconstruction? What are we doing? What are we doing to do? What are we going to do? Sorry, what are we doing to do? There's an error there. What are we going to do with the development afterwards? You already know we've talked about this. What are you doing for the reconstruction? Yourself as an adult, you must ensure all that we have discussed. You are a facilitator. You are a guide. You are to support. Don't forget transference of activity. Start it. Let the child be the center of his or her own learning. Provide the appropriate environment. All those basic components of a prepared environment: nurture, orderliness, freedom of movement, independence, development of social community. All this must be in place so that normality can take place. Okay, we have talked about repression. That's the discussion, the diagram I discussed with you. The right environment. In the right environment, normality will come to play naturally. You saw that in that, what's it called? That diagram. So the eyes of the teacher must be trained. His sensitivity must be developed in the teacher in order to recognize the ephemeral phenomenon of concentration when it occurs. So that is talking about, it's talking about, what is it called now? The observation that takes place, and you see the child in the process of concentration. Remember the story I shared with you in this book? I think it's in the one I printed for you. I mean, I scanned. You will read it there. About that guy, about that little child, 3-year-old, that was working with a cylinder and did it over and over again. Montessori counted almost 40 times. And Montessori refers to this as the internal cycle of activity that is taking place. And I want to read it to us here quickly as we round up. I think it's in page 226. Okay. Mhm. I want to start it from where? Sorry, let me look at where I'm supposed to read it from. Circle of activity. Okay. I'm trying to look at where I don't want to read this story. I think I've missed it. Just read it. I wanted to read it to us here, but 226. Okay, it's that same story. She read it. She observed that the child was doing the activity for almost a class of 46. And the child did the activity for almost concentrated was 40 years ago.
Concentration was about 40 times.
You are on that page, Abby?
No, I read it in the afternoon.
Okay, you read it, yes. Okay, she said something here. She said, yes. She said the child repeated it 30 or 40 times. And when I asked the teacher to get all the children to sing, they all sang, and still this child remained absorbed in her work. Then all of a sudden, the child was done. She had done the exercise perhaps 40 times or more. The singing had not disturbed her. She stopped because some internal thing that had been completed, which she called the cycle of activity. So the cycle of activity stops all of a sudden. This suggests that something has happened inside, which is of great importance. Even if it only happens to one out of a class of 45, if I had not noticed the concentration of this child, the teacher would not have done so either. And she would have insisted that that child join in with others when it was time to sing. And so the child's concentration would have been broken. So that's what she's referring to, like, give the children the opportunity. That was the aha moment. And we must always ensure that we keep our eyes open to look out for things like that. And so when we are able to look through all this that we have talked about, ensure that we prepare ourselves adequately, the new teacher will evolve. So imagine a classroom where the new child evolves, the new teacher evolves. Definitely learning is going to take place. When the children become normal in this way, a new type of teacher is needed, a teacher who can help normality. Promotion of independence. The teacher must also understand that the environment belongs to the children. It is not hers. We've said this before, because she's the teacher. Of course, that does not mean that the child is superior. You know, we also have, like I said earlier on, there are times where there are ground rules and there are consequences for breaking ground rules. Doesn't mean that you leave children to do anything. When you have consequences, maybe if they are not working with activities the way they are supposed to work, you have some consequences in place that the child would have to take time out because they are not following the ground rules. Concentration and non-interference. The teacher must recognize the first moment of concentration and don't disturb it. That's what we just discussed now. Don't disturb that concentration. Correction of errors. So never interfere when a child is working by himself. Don't be preoccupied about whether he's making mistakes. You must not correct him at that moment. What you do is wait and observe. You don't go there and say, "Oh, what are you doing? Will you stop that?" Wait. Take a moment to see if that child can correct himself. So if the child is not able to solve the problem, then you can come in and guide the child appropriately. But at least give that opportunity to let that child feel and let him try and correct. So if you cannot now do it, you now give that child the opportunity. Disorderly children, we've talked about that. Children become disordered because the environment is not giving them what they need. You can do nothing when children are disorderly. What you have to do is give the appropriate environment. You can't do nothing to the child. It is the environment and you that is supporting the child with the environment that you ensure works right with the child and give the adequate support. Summing up the new teacher, the children know that okay. The children know that in this attractive environment, they are free to choose their own occupation. And there is this attractive, dignified person there to help and guide them, and that's the teacher. They will have confidence in you, but not that they are attached to you. They are confident in what you're able to do with them, but they are not, for them to support their learning, but not that they are wholly depending on you. Our goal is to develop independence. All right. So with that, we're good with time. 2 minutes to our time. Please make sure you take time to read the lectures, the 1946 London lectures. And also you can do well to prepare a mind map for your assignment. Read through your tutorials and it will be helpful. All right. Any question? Any question? Any question? I wanted to ask something I want to be sure that I am not, sometimes it's possible for you to just be dishing out, and it's not resulting to anything. How has it been so far for you with this program? Are you getting value, or is it too much, or you think it's not meeting your expectation? If you want to say something, please. So that we know if I need to change my strategy. Anyone who wants to say something? How is it so far? Are we going too fast? Is the information overwhelming? How is it going for you? Mrs. Rahim, you want to say something?
Can I talk, ma? Yes, ma.
Yes, ma'am.
For me personally, the class has been quite explicit, You have been taking us up like it do. And I'll say your teaching has been so perfect because you always make sure that you go down the route in explaining the details of every topic to us, backing them up with good examples. That is what me I've been able to study over the time, and it has really helped my understanding of these Montessori techniques or pedagogy, whichever way we want to put it. So that's what I can just say for now, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other person?
Good evening, ma.
Good evening, Falake.
Hello, Lakemi. Yeah. I think I have one concern concerning this Montessori thing. The past like 1-2 years, I have encountered like children that are said to like be coming from the background, the teaching of Montessori, and some of them when they came here, like I think I had a set of twins that they came around 2.5 years and they were not potty trained. I knew the school they were coming from that is a fully Montessori setting. At 2.5 years, they came here with Pampers. I did potty training for them. And they came in crying. They couldn't do anything independently. They were just crying. And everything actually stopped at my center because of my play-based method of training, of teaching the children. And the brother too, as I then was going to grade 1, he has even done graduation. the boy could not express himself. If you ask him for his name, we'll just be looking at you. And I had to like recommend another school to the mom, and they are doing fine now. So that's my concern, that is it not going to make the children mute? Because my son too then attended the crèche, and I noticed that as at his age then, at about 1+, he wasn't talking, he was just looking, he wasn't talking. So is it particularly about the school or just the method? I don't know. That's my concern about the Montessori thing.
Montessori, don't generalize. Oh. The people that told you they are doing Montessori, you don't know what they are doing in that school.
Exactly.
Maybe it's the, I don't know what they are doing there, but all that we're talking about here, all this noise have been making since. You think the child will be mute? Parents come to us and say, if the child is in an environment where the child is, we've talked about freedom of expression.
Yes.
Children express in a typical Montessori environment. You can't keep them mute for where. So number one, you cannot generalize. Number two, the stages of development also differs. You can't say that maybe the time the children got to your school was when they were at that stage when they developed. Because we didn't look at the two sides, except we go to that school and sat there and observe. Then we can say maybe they didn't do the right thing. So we don't have the total picture, and so we cannot conclude. We can't conclude that it's because of the method they say in quotes that they're using with them. And the child also matters. Also, when you're talking about children like that, too many factors that you can consider. But what I can tell you is, it is not the Montessori method that made the children to be wearing diaper at 2+. It is not that method. It could be that if it was not applied properly, or even the stage of development of the children themselves. So as much as possible, from my own experience, I've been running this program for God knows how many years now. Our children are super independent. Super independent. Part of the things we do when we talk about for practical life area is in the module. When you see it there. We teach them independence to the point of cleaning up when they go to the bathroom. That at the time it became serious problem for us, because parents will say, the children will want to clean up themselves, because we teach them how to take out tissue, how to wipe for female from the front to the back, how to sit, all these things. They are etiquette. Etiquette is a whole section in practical life area. When you finish toilet, how you wash your hand, how you will see when you see the module when you get it. So there's no way you carry out those activities and the child will not do what they are supposed to do. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other before we call it a night or a day? Any other comment? Is anyone finding it too much information? You are struggling and thinking of how we can make it easy.
Okay.
Pico.
Mommy, for me, the reading aspect is actually my challenge right now, because I work alone, and I was actually happy like a month ago. I got someone to help with me with, and I paid her on Monday, and yesterday she disappeared. She didn't come again. So I'm back to working alone now. So, and I still have a baby with me right now. The mom is to come around 10:30 to pick him up. So having to read and all that is not that easy for me. So that's the challenge I currently have with meeting up with the reading.
Don't worry, keep working at it. Try the much you can. I understand. I know what it is like. Taking those children by yourself is a whole lot. You are the admin, you are the teacher, you are the everything, then you still have home front, you have a baby, is a lot. So don't worry, everything will be unfolding little by little. And I'm sure at the end of the day, it will be useful for us.
Amen. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. In the absence of any question or comment, can we call it a night? All right, I will call it a night. So thank you everybody for your time. We're starting week 2 on Saturday. So please, you should be working on your folders now. We'll start going into your folders to see what we're doing there. Go there, read through your tutorial, read through your all the scanned copies, and just do this thing. It will be helpful for you, honestly. And you will love who you are becoming. All right? Thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you on Saturday.
All right. Thank